Brian, and it's great to see a good crowd. I think anybody who lives on PEI is pretty much aware. Is it too loud? Okay. And I've got a bit of a chest cold, so if I start hacking and coughing, I'm not dying. I will survive. Okay, thank you. So anybody that lives on PEI is quite well aware that irrigation from high-capacity wells has become a real, fairly large public policy issue. And for those that aren't here, I'll just give you a quick reprise of how we sort of ended up where we are here. There's always been 2 or 3 dozen farms that used irrigation. It wasn't widely used. In 2001, PEI had a full-blown drought. And the potato processing sector in particular, Cavendish Farms and McCain, had to import potatoes from other places in order to meet their contracts. And so through the early 2000s, there was more discussion about granting more licenses for irrigation permits. The agriculture minister at the time was a guy called Mitch Murphy from Kensington. And he resisted. He was concerned about the impact on the aquifer around Kensington, where there are a number of farms and Cavendish Farms itself. And so a moratorium was implemented. And then that went on for several years. And then just in the last 3 or 4 years, the discussion again started up about ending the moratorium and allowing more high-capacity wells to go in. I think the Department of Environment did work out a new policy based on some different assumptions and so on, which we'll hear about over the next little while. And I think there was a feeling that this was a plan that was ready to go. Watershed groups were gathered back in November to sort of talk about how the new plan would work. But then opposition started to grow around that, and we'll explore a little bit of why that opposition and what the concerns are. That's part of what we'll be hearing about over the next little while. And it really has turned into a sort of full-blown political issues, economic issues, and at the moment, the province has said that they're going to develop what they're calling a Water Act, which should give some guidance about how irrigation might happen in the future. So we did hear yesterday from Anthony Hopkins that they debated this for about 10 years in England to try to get it right, and they're still struggling with it. We're going to have to do it here probably in about 10 months, and we still have to wait to see whether we get it right or not. But it may be a surprise, as I say to some that don't live on PEI, that we're here debating whether this should happen or not, but we are, and the public discussion has been very spirited. There have been legislative hearings, excellent presentations on both sides of the issue. And today, I'm really pleased that we have a terrific group of people who each bring their own perspective and experience around this issue. And I think we'll have a very kind of spirited discussion. I do encourage people in the audience, if they have questions, if they want to make comments, to just stand up and say them or put their hand up. And we do want to include as wide a discussion as possible here. We have a couple of hours, so we don't have to rush through anything. Now, the first thing I'm going to ask is I'm going to ask each of the participants just to tell us their name and what they do. It'll become clear as we go ahead about the positions that various people are having, but let's just find out a little bit more about each person. So, Stephen, perhaps I'll start with you.
Okay, I thought I said...
And I guess you're going to have to kind of, move the mics around just a little bit. Thank you.
Can you hear me there? Okay, my name is Steve McKinnon. I thought on this end I'd have to start last, but I'm position myself. My name is Steve McKinnon. I'm a 7th generation farmer. We've been farming for over 200 years in the same spot out in New Argyle, which is just between Plan B and the South Shore.
Plan B is a whole other issue.
I guess I shouldn't have brought that one up. So we've been there, and my mother's people are from up Kensington, and we've been here up in Kensington area since the 1760s, I guess. My ancestral father came over in Sam and Holland. But anyway, we've been farming in the same block of land for over 200 years now where I'm at. And I'm right at this point on the district director of the National Farmers Union. I've sat on the community improvement groups. I've PI Holstein Association. I sit now as president of Agri Co-op in Charlottetown. So I guess what I see, but oops, I guess I'm very not into the issue right now. But just basically Steve McKinnon here, and hopefully our stand is at this point is just basically kind of in the middle. We don't know where we're going, so it's hard to go, proceed unless you know where you're going.
Okay. Fred?
Hi, my name is Fred Shivery from Surrey. I'm the watershed coordinator in that area, have been for 10 years. I'm a retired school teacher, junior high level, 31 years. Thus explains the haircut. So the last 10 years I've been heavily involved in that. I also operated a small farm, fresh market in the summertime for forever. Okay, that's me.
And Gary?
My name is Gary Schneider. I'm the co-chair of the Environmental Coalition of Prince Edward Island. I also run the McPhail Woods Ecological Forestry Project. I also sat as a member of the Provincial Roundtable on Resource Land Use and Stewardship, which made a final presentation in '97, so I've been at this a while.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Donald. I live not far from here, outside of Kensington. I've worked in the industry for over 20 years. I have a degree from NSAC. I also have an MBA. Worked with McCain Foods early part of my career, primarily in agronomy, and then worked with the Cavendish group of companies for many years in various areas of responsibility, I'll say, primarily with Cavendish Agri-Services. Always felt that I worked, or actually I did work for the producers, and when the opportunity came to work for the PF board, I truly can work for the producers. So I worked for the 250 plus potato farms here in the island, and I'm accountable for carrying out the mandate of the potato producers, which is them working together towards long-term profitability and sustainability with primary focus in the areas of marketing, negotiations, lobbying, and research, more so as of late, and certainly all activities that promote quality potato production here in PEI.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jason Webster. I live in Middleton, PEI here with my wife and my 2 children. I guess I've grown up on the 3rd generation potato operation in Middleton. I'm a co-owner now of Middleton Farms Limited with my father. Middleton Farms Limited is also a co-owner of Mid-Isle Farms, which is a packing facility now in PEI. 2 years ago, Middleton Farms entered into a joint venture with 2 other farms, our neighbors, and we're operating the farm now under the name of MWM Farms Limited, trying to be more efficient. Middleton Farms is also a member of, we're also a member of the Innovative Farms Group. Innovative Farms Group is a group of progressive farmers in central Prince Edward Island. We're collaborating in efforts to address our many sustainability challenges on our farms. Some of our priorities have included working on continuous improvement of potato rotational crop production, environmental stewardship, benchmarking the performance of our farms against each other, and improving communication between our member farms. Current group of 10 farms represents approximately 16,000 acres of total crop production with a focus on 5,300 acres of potatoes. And I've had the lucky distinction of being the guy that did the presentations for the IFG group to the Standing Committee on Agriculture and to the watershed groups in November. So that's why I got the names to put up here too.
Yeah, I think Jason was kicking and screaming into becoming the poster boy for all of this, and I'm sure it hasn't been too easy. All of the presentations in front of the legislative committee, both for and against more irrigation, have indicated that they really want to see science and good research, and that the decision that's eventually made, the minister has said this as well, must be based on good science. So I wanted to ask each of our panelists, what information, what evidence, I guess, have you seen that sort of brought you to the point of view that you have at the moment? So Craig, perhaps I'll ask you first about your position in terms of thinking that the moratorium should end.
Sure. Thanks, Ian. This isn't something new. I know you mentioned that. It was this was put in place after that drought year, 2001, and it was a one-year moratorium. So we're now, obviously, it's over a decade since then, and that one-year moratorium was to allow sufficient time to do more studies to ensure that with high-capacity wells that they could be used responsibly. So what the potato board, I'm going to say we gave our first formal presentation, and it was together with Cavendish Farms in the fall of 2012 to both the Minister of Environment and Minister of Agriculture. We just asked the question, and that question was, can you remove the moratorium? But it was provided, and I really stress that word provided, that the scientific data, the work that they've done, shows that it won't do any harm to our groundwater and/or aquatic life, the environment. So we just asked the question. And the answer that we got back from the Department of Environment was that they were satisfied with the research and the studies that they have done, right to the director level. So they assured us that, and there's also a new water extraction policy that's available online. So we were being told that the work was completed, that there was sufficient, they're confident with the work that was done, therefore they didn't see any reason why the moratorium couldn't be removed. Now that's folks within the department staff, and then I think where the challenge has been is with the political side of things. So that's so we're relying on the work that our Department of Environment done. I know Yifang spoke yesterday, very respected researcher. He's a very competent hydrogeologist. He was hired specifically to study this, and so there's been a lot of work done. I know we've got Canadian water,
Canadian Rivers.
Thank you. Yeah, it's done work. There's been a number of work done, so there's a fairly significant body there. And I might add too that when we have all along the potato board on behalf of the producers have said that recommended to the province that information be put up for peer review. That perhaps there should be an independent body that's agreed, by the various folks with differences of opinion on this subject matter, to select an independent third party, do a review of it, and then if it's good, great, and if not, where are the gaps, what further work, and with the perspective that the science has to be right. I think we can't afford to have any issues with the environment. So. Those, I guess, Ian, those would be my main points. I'd also add that with the extraction policy, I know producers would be very supportive of a limited number of wells that the science, says that are possible, and also that there'd be monitoring of existing and new wells. And again, I think there's about 36 high-capacity wells in PI used for agricultural irrigation right now, and there's no evidence that there's any issues, for example, with those wells. So it's the Department of Environment's data, and again, we're blessed. We have a lot of rain here in PEI. We have over 1,100 millimeters of rain a year. We have one of the highest recharge rates in Canada. We only use 7% of available groundwater, and of that, the numbers are 60% are used for residential. This is all Department of Environment information. 30% is used for commercial, 8% for livestock, 1% for golf courses, and only 1% is currently used for agricultural irrigation. The only, and that's the only, that 1% is the only sector that there's a moratorium on high capacity wells. So if you want to put a car wash in, you want to put a golf course, you can get a permit for a deep water well, or excuse me, high capacity well. So it's the dark environment information.
Okay.
Based on
Gary, Gary Schneider, certainly very thoughtful, has thought about a lot of environmental issues having to do with forestry and other issues. So, Gary, what has informed you, I guess, in terms of your concerns about this?
I guess I like the idea of us accumulating science on things. My experience with science is that it's a fluid process. So my concern here is that we might think it's a good idea, and if we get it wrong, we're really in trouble. And I've lived here for 38 years, and I've watched how forestry has progressed here, or in some cases not progressed. And there was scientists within the department and all their staff that said, poultry harvesting forests and putting in Scots pine plantations and Norway spruce plantations, those kinds of things made sense. And this is why I've really developed this love of science that says, science tells you things, but it doesn't ever give you a definitive answer on something. And when I was thinking about this issue, the thing that kept coming to mind was not in isolation. We can't look at this and say, even if we can get people to agree that there's lots of water here, is that the only thing we base a decision on? So do you look at, well, what about saltwater intrusion? Do we look at climate change? Do we look at increasing the cost to grow an acre of potatoes so that we wind up not being able to perhaps do the right rotations or take the right, give the right protection around pesticides? And again, I thought when we sat through the roundtable stuff and worked with a lot of farmers that we'd come up to with a consensus that people would adopt pretty quickly. But there has been such resistance to things like the proper crop rotation and stuff. So I do worry that we look at it very much in isolation and say, this is a mathematical issue when there's tons of other issues. We almost need to do a comprehensive study that says, how much can we do in potatoes and this island? Because again, it's not just the water. That's one of the things that I listened to all my friends with watershed groups and UPI researchers and stuff who are very concerned about this. But that's one component of the issue. So I guess I'm looking at it as a bigger picture.
Okay. Jason, yourself, I guess you've used irrigation for quite a while. So I presumably it's your own experience, I guess, that makes you feel comfortable with what you're doing.
Well, it's actually, I'll be truthful here in how long I've used irrigation. Personally for myself, we're on our third year of irrigating. When we did our joint venture 2 years ago, our neighbors were been irrigating since I think around 06 or something like that. And we watched them doing it, and then when we did the joint venture with them, we started irrigating with them, and we took it kind of together, took it to the next level, and went harder at it and wanted to be more consistent. And I guess the real drive for me has been what I've seen over the last 2 years. We've had two, what I would say, semi-dry years where we've had stress on the crop, and the varieties especially that we're having to grow the most of, called russet Burbank, has shown some serious signs of sugar ends and dark ends and stuff in them, which is making it hard to market them. And on our irrigated stuff, when we irrigate it properly and efficiently, and when I'm talking about properly and efficiently, in my opinion only, is we're only running about ½ an inch at a time when we run the pivot around. And the difference there is, I know Anthony talked about it earlier, you've seen how you can get a cap on the row if it's too dry and you put water on it, just cap the top and run off. And he's exactly right. Sometimes, in some areas where they irrigate, they only put down 0.3 of an inch on the first pass, especially if they're starting in dry time. And then they'll put ½ an inch or more on, because surprisingly enough, you're better off to put a little bit on first, loosen the soil up, then it'll accept more the next time. And we're trying to learn all that stuff. And what worries me, I guess, I spent 4 years on the processing committee, which is a division of the potato board, and negotiating contracts and stuff like that. Luckily, I got to travel a bit of North America and see other areas and see what they're doing. And when you get to these other areas that we're competing with, and you see what they're able to do with irrigation and with their crops, and efficiently use their yields that just blow my mind, you know what I mean, how they can possibly do it, but they are doing it. And what we are finding out and realizing as we get into this more and more, and in the discussion of irrigation and what we can possibly do with it is, for one thing, there was some tests done last year on PI, on irrigated ground, the same field, where we took soil samples out of where the irrigation was and where it wasn't. And the nitrate levels 2 feet down were lower where the irrigation was. And when you think about it all makes sense. If you put fertilizer in the ground and you keep your plants healthy and keep moisture there, so the plants are picking up the fertilizer all year long, there's going to be less leaching or less available to be leached out or lost into the environment after. And it makes absolutely no sense for producers from an environmental standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from everything, to put too much inputs on and just have them there and waste. And what we've realized too a lot is, in Kalish Farms is right now into a test with one of their pivots where they're trying fertigation. In the U.S., we had an agrologist up here this spring, by the name of Steve Holland, and he's not unfamiliar with PDI now. He's been here for probably 3 or 4 springs. And he does a lot of work with planting and stuff, but he also works a lot with growers down there with irrigation and fertigation. And his line to me was, we had quite a conversation with this, he said, the best input fertilizer that you can have is the one you haven't put on yet, because you can control when it goes on and goes on at the right time. And that's what they're able to do with the fertigation. We said you have a very difficult uphill battle when you're dropping everything in with the planter at the start, and then hoping Mother Nature gives you the right weather pattern so it releases at the right time so the plants get to use it. And the frustrating part as a young grower like myself, when I see all this and start to understand it, is we've been held back for so long by this moratorium that our research and development hasn't caught up. And now we're even fighting it still when the water's available, according to the scientists, the water's available, and if it is, then I'm happy to, I think we should be able to use it. And the possibilities, we're already seeing our nitrate levels drop due to, I believe, our better management and less acres and trying to do a better job. If we can drop all that even more and even better the environment, I can't see how this is a loss to us. I think this is a win-win to everybody. But 100%, I tried to stress this in our presentations before. I live here too. I have a young family. I have, my wife and I are blessed with a set of twins who are 6 years old. And we live right at the farm. And we plan to, if we get to, we'd like to irrigate right at the farm, right across the road. And I believe it would be better for us to have irrigation across the road and get to learn how to do this properly and use our fertilizers properly and minimize the risk to our water supply rather than go the other way. And I know that's probably new to some people in the room here to think that way, but that's the reality of what's going on in other areas. And we need to be able to embrace this and move on with it safely and environmentally correctly and make sure we don't risk our drinking water, because I'm drinking it too and I want it to be there. But if it's there in droves, like they're saying, we're only using 7% of the recharge. I think it was an extreme case. Dr. Terry mentioned yesterday they're using the aquifer, they're using more than the recharge and then some, and they're actually draining their aquifer. We're talking about only using a little more of a percentage of our annual recharge. So until we get, if I understand this correctly, until we get to the point where we were using all of our annual recharge, we wouldn't be draining our tank, more or less. So as long as we're only talking 1 or 2% more of our annual recharge and it's managed properly, then why aren't we embracing this and moving on and catching up with these other areas before we fall so far behind we can?
Stephen, you did a lot of research for your presentation in front of the legislative committee, and I know you thought a lot about this. What's informed you about this issue?
I guess the scary thing is, and I guess I should say right off the bat, right off the start, Greg and Jason are right in a lot of areas. The same thing is, whenever you see a moratorium on anything, basically it's a holding position and allows whatever the problems to be hopefully addressed down the road. So the government has done a horrible job, taking like 10 or 11 years to, like we're starting today where we should have started 10 or 11 years ago, besides that. When this started hitting this year again, Greg gave me a call and he was polite and very friendly, but I don't know, he's working with the Data Board, and he said, the science proves that the water's there. And I said, okay, what science? And he says, well, I don't have it here, but the Department of Environment does. So anyway, we got a hold of the Department of Environment. I usually have to do it by mail because I don't have a computer and So they sent me out, it's 4 different kind of, I don't know, 20-page or 30-page studies that were done. And because we asked for all the scientific data and how it was done to prove that there is water there. So I read through it 3 times. And basically, it was done up here in Northbrook, which is a tributary on the Dump River. And I think it's roughly a foot deep and 12 feet across or something. And basically what all that research was basically for aquatic life, you know, the stream health, the insects and all that. So whenever it got to the point, I looked all through it to find out where the science is, the actual science that says the water's there. And what it was they used an irrigation pump, and they sucked it out from one area and measured the drop and the withdrawal and the observations and pumped it back in, I think, 100 feet or so down the thing. It's all scientifically great. But in 2006, they pumped in the middle part of it for, I think, 29 hours, and the lower part for 20, and then in 2007, they did it for, I think it was 26 hours. So that's what their science is, and I told them to send it all to me. That's what their science is 3 little pumps on a little foot-deep stream to say that, you know, there's all kinds of water here on PEI. And basically that extraction wasn't about setting up a policy for extraction for irrigation. It was basically just to see the effect on the biotic life in that stream. And I guess why it really came to the forefront last year was, you know, potato producers and others. And it's not just potato producers, like it's time for a water policy for all these carnivores and, you know, golf course and everything. But if there's that much water there, Sherrilltown had 3 pumping fields, and they were running at 94%, and they were thinking of putting in fines if you were going to be washing car. Like they got to that point where they were, you know, telling people to cut back. So they went and put in another field, my understanding is Melton Vale. So I think in the first 3 fields they had 13 deep wells or whatever, and I think they had 5 in this one. So I mean, if all the water's there, it seems really strange that they were running at 94% capacity and telling people you can't water your lawn or wash your car. Another thing I was able to do is I have a real good friend who went down to what they call, they have a different name for it, it's a septic show in the States, down in Minnesota way, they call it the show. And it's, yeah. So anyway, it takes all the people in from, you know, the States, and they have such a huge population. And they asked my friend, they said, where are you from? They were asking, he held up his hand and said, I'm from PEI. And his head hydrologist down there said, you're among only 2% of the population in the world that, you know, rely on 100% for your groundwater, for your drinking and that. And so anyway, I got information out of Minnesota. They have, I think, over 20 million acres of agricultural land down there. We have about 600,000 acres that we cover one way or another. And they've been doing irrigation down there for a number of years. And right at this point, I think, this was done in 2012 or whatever, is they're irrigating about 600,000 acres a year down there for 20 million, which is basically all our farm land. And what they found is the nitrate level where it wasn't being irrigated was 5.4 milligrams per liter. And it's gone up where it's irrigated. It's over 17, and the safe drinking level was 10. So I guess what scares me is if that's what they call science, I'm a little nervous, like it's hard for me to decide which way to go, but I think we need a lot more information that is given it to people. And what, like I was saying to Fred before we come up, science to me, probably 8% of science is observation and then trying to draw conclusions from it. And as Gary said, it's always a fluid thing. So the analytic stuff you do in a laboratory or, you know, the stuff that they sent me, it's all fine and good. There's also what I call science, which is observation that's passed down in generations of that. And I'll give you a couple of little quick examples. Just right below me, 40 years ago, I was about 10 years old, there was 2 families that had a Hatfield toy thing going on, and they got mad one night and took their car and put it in the little stream beside it, and you could barely see the stream. I drove by that stream yesterday. That same stream now is about this wide, and about this, you can hardly hide a tire in a little car. So what I've started thinking about too, it's when you talk to people about how the streams and rivers are, you'll talk about siltation and all that kind of stuff. But what strikes me funny, even my lifetime being in the same place for all these years, is that the flow has gone down too. Even if it silts in, there still should be the flow. And I think in the last 40 years, just from our human impact here, being more industrial maybe, you know, with the cities and processing or whatever water is used for, I think this isn't just a problem that happened this year or 10 years ago. I think this has been a thing that's been going on even that I've seen before. And I know in the Winter River watershed, you know, Falls been there for generations, and they said, if you don't think it's your own town that's draining our streams, he says, you should come and see it. Because he says, when I I walked through them when I was a kid, he said they were full, and he says now they're drying up. So I think Minnesota is really, they have a lot of research done there, so if I found it, it's a sad state of affairs if the PEI government is not down there investigating it. If it's applicable up here, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but holy heavens, they've done all kinds of research there. We really should be looking at that. And whatever science is, it should be transparent and taken to groups like this or other groups or meetings and show them what it is.
And Fred, what's your sense, sorry, Fred, what's your sense of the research that's out there and how it's helped to inform your feelings about this?
Well, I guess when a company comes in and tells it do my way, or we might leave, that kind of triggers a person's interest, okay? But I always question the science. I know some good scientists, I got nothing against them, but we're playing with our groundwater, totally dependent on groundwater for our drinking water, and so we want to make sure our science is right. This is not a situation like if CFIA inspects the meat poorly and put an advertisement in the paper and tell you to take the meat off the shelf. It's gone. The situation of it is if they make a mistake here, you can't really take your water off the shelf. Okay? So from a human part of it, I want to make sure that that science is 100% correct. I want to make sure it's transparent. I want to make sure lay people like me have the opportunity to get a full grasp on it that will satisfy me. I'm getting so old right now that I don't trust that many people anymore. And perfectly honest, I don't trust governments. They don't give a damn what legal strength that they are. A number of years ago, people were told there was all kinds of caught fish. You couldn't fish them all if you wanted. Well, we proved that wrong. Then they said, well, the signs are there, they'll rebound next number of years. Well, that didn't happen, right? So, sometimes research scientists, sometimes government acts like car salesmen. Okay, they give you that promise. The situation of this is the one element that you have in PEI that gets people's backs up, not because they don't want to inhibit anybody's living, not because this could be a good thing, but I want to make 100% sure that it's right. There's not one chance in hell that we can make a mistake in this one, okay? And so that's where I am personally. I think my board of directors are pretty well on the same way. The other side is, quite honestly, since I'm a watershed coordinator, we do an awful lot of work in the Surrey area in terms of fish habitat restoration. I've got 2 crews at Chainsaw doing work today in the streams, and I left. And recently we have got glowing reports in terms of some of our rivers in the eastern area have far exceeded the conservation levels with the potential of catch and release Atlantic salmon in our area. So we're doing something right. But if there is by chance a situation where there's deep water wells that are dug high in the watershed, the location of them is very important to me, and they interfere with first order streams. And the first order streams, as many times it's our nursery area for small fish. And if those small fish, that's their area, they're safe, it's small, it's narrow, it's shallow up in there, and all of a sudden it starts to dry up, they slip down to the second order streams. Guess what's the second order streams? Bigger fish, and blood just conserved. Okay, so all of a sudden you miss a year's classification. Okay, anybody can prove to me that we can have a sustainable adventure with deep water wells. It's not going to affect our environmental community or aquatic health. It's not going to affect our human health. And you prove to me, and I live long enough that you can prove to me, then I'll be a happy man. Until that point, you don't have to prove it. So.
One of the things that's really intrigued me about this is we're trying to bring a lot of precision, to our understanding of the amount of water that's there and so on. And let me ask Carrie and Yang, if I could, how difficult is it? I guess, this is groundwater. This is stuff that's happening below the ground. We can't see it, we can't really touch it. Can we bring that kind of precision, I guess, in terms of understanding both the quantity and how the aquifers are interacting with each other, and it feels like a big mystery to me, and yet we're trying to talk about this as some sort of scientific proof that we know what's going on. Kerry?
Sure, I'll try to address that briefly. We can't give the 100% that Fred would like, unfortunately. We just...
Give me 98.
Well, we might get into the 90s.
I was a teacher, I never gave 100%, so I give a few 98s, okay? Turned out good, okay?
So, yeah, that's difficult. It's the subsurface, we can't perfectly characterize it in terms of its properties and so on. So we have to look at sort of indicators of groundwater recharge, such as the base flow, analysis of stream records. We don't have every stream of the island gauged, so we don't know the flows in every stream. So we have these hydrometric reference sites. So we can make reasonable estimates, I would say, what recharge are and so on, using different techniques. But it's never going to be 100%. That's something that in any of the sciences, it's just not possible to do that. Even if you go to the doctor and they give you their professional opinion on some condition, and they don't make that certainly either. So it's not possible to do that. But as I tried to emphasize yesterday in the presentation, I think there's various factors that can be sort of brought to play, techniques to make the assessment.
That's good. Yeah, please.
I just want to comment. I think everyone up here agrees 100%, Fred, with that comment. Like, the science has to be right. For the reasons Jason said, that because number one, farmers care. They're part of the community. They're owners for the same reason we all do with the water resource. And two, from a business perspective, it's just good business today. We've had challenges, or are having challenges with nitrate levels, with fish kills. Like, we can't afford to continue with those sorts of issues. The dilemma, or the conundrum, is that how do we get to? There's a lot of science, a lot more than Stephen, I think you led on. There's been a lot more research been done. And when is enough? Like, what do we need to do? Like, again, the agriculture, the potato industry is the backbone of our economy here. It's very important to us in PEI. We have this water resource. We don't want to mess this one up. How do we get to keep an open mind, work together, and enable us to maintain and grow the business and remain competitive and have a future in it, while that can only happen while preserving and protecting the environment. And again, if there's questions around the work that's being done, I think that the various opinions should come together, choose an independent body that can review the science and tell us if it's good enough, or if there's gaps. What are the gaps? What do we need to do to address those? I think that needs to be the approach. But the challenge and the dilemma is that with the politicians, it gets political, is it's a very complex issue, and farming is complex today. I think there's still an idealistic, I'll say, or perception of farming amongst the folks that aren't in the industry, that it's a little red barn on a hill, and Jason wears overalls and his piece of hay, and there's some animals running around. It's, in the last 5 years, it's changed dramatically, with advances in nutrient management and pest management and GPS technology and environmental stewardship, and all this, we have millions of feet of terraces, and there's a lot of things that are being done, and the general public doesn't understand that anymore, and we're still being criticized for things that happened in the past, and like Jason said, the last 5 years have been highlighted that the nitrate levels in our streams have been declining. I think it's a reflection of better management and whatnot. good things. But with the politicians, it's, the gap is getting wider between, even here in PEI, if you live in Charlottetown, used to be relatives in the countryside that you'd visit that on a farm, and there's less and less of that. So the division's getting greater, and we failed in continuing to communicate with the public. So the challenge is that the politicians just don't want to touch it because it's too much of a political hot potato. So I guess, how do we get to getting the right thing done and allowing us to move ahead? It's a challenge.
I'd like to have a quick round. Nitrates, I think, is one of the more insidious issues that PEI has been facing. And you can read research that supports both points of view. That used properly, irrigation can lessen the nitrate load because, as Jason was saying, the plants end up using the fertilizer there. I certainly remember 2001 going out after the harvest and seeing these huge bands of fertilizer that had never been used, that of course disappeared that fall and winter, into the aquifer. So you can see the efficiency argument. I've certainly read several studies that indicated that with over irrigation, the nitrates fall into the aquifer and it makes the problem even worse. Is there consensus, I guess, in terms of where this is? Stephen, what have you heard about this issue?
Well, I have it here. There's a PEI map that shows a hot spot for nitrates, and it's up like the Summerside, the deck area. I guess what I see is, like what Jason's saying, like if we could read nature 100%, it would be really easy to manage it, but we can't. And I don't know, many of us around PEI here Wednesday, we had that down, flooded water. Even if, like what Jason then says, like they're good managers, they're smart people. If you go and put on the fertilizer and you do the irrigation properly, and then 24 hours later you get a dead deluge of 2 or 3 inches. Once again, like you were saying, where the risk is that water soluble stuff gets past the roots before they have time to soak it up. And that's why I'm kind of curious with the Minnesota study, because I mean they spent a huge amount of money down there. They're talking 20 million acres where they've done research. I guess once again, we're talking nitrates. I guess we'll go on this hot water inclusion later. But I mean the nitrate problem, potato industry, some of them are talking about even getting higher yields. Well, you can't just throw a potato in a bucket of water and it grow. There's going to be more fertilizer used if you're going to up your production by 50 to 100%. So once again, I guess what I get nervous of is if we put farmers like Jason and Brendan and we spend this kind of money, what happens like the UK speaker, where if something happens and we do go dry, because just remember, you're watching the news here this past week, 2011, it floods every Winnipeg area and devastated the farms and all that. They said it's 1 in a 300-year rain flood. Geez, it happened again 3 years later. So we really don't have we can never probably read Mother Nature. So I think we have to be really, really careful that we don't do something, even with good intent and good management, and end up harming ourselves. We have to be really careful about that. Okay. Jason, paint us a bit of a picture as to how irrigation could be used to properly apply nitrogen and to make sure it's as efficient as possible. How could that happen?
Well, currently, this is where the R&D thing, say we're behind on it, is currently we do what we call ban fertilizer. We were talking about seeing it. I seen some of the data last year, by the way, not as bad. It was 2001 because of the dry year. You could still see fertilizer when I was pulling my 10-foot strips in the fall to do yield samples. And the big advantage, I guess, would be that we can see that what we're being told from the other areas that have had a lot of experience in it is they've stopped. They don't do any of this ban fertilizer at all. So what they do is they'll spread on their fertilizers like potassium that tends to stay in the soil anyway, attaches to soil particles and doesn't leak. They'll spread it with a broadcast, and then they'll come in and they'll use fertigation, which is liquid nitrogen, in their irrigation systems, but only apply it as the plant needs it. I can't remember if I said this earlier or not, but I'll say it again. What they're doing down there, what they're doing down there is they'll have they do a lot of tissue analysis, and we do a fair bit of it here in PEI now too. Our farm, we've done it for quite a few years, and we use it to apply some of our fertilizers through our sprayers to try and do exactly what they're doing with fertigation, but it's on a lot smaller level, and it's not near as effective, but it does help some. So the attractive thing for me is if we can get to the point where instead of dumping all this nitrogen down in the van, if we can get to the point where we just have it on in a tote sitting by the pivot, and we take our tissue analysis this morning, send it to the lab, and they do the analysis on the plants. Once we get a baseline set, which other areas have, we have to do the research on what they've done and then compare it to our own situation, what we've done. Once you get a baseline set, so you know where it needs to be, then you can just keep the plant there and then just slowly feed it through the year. So instead of having all that fertilizer sitting there hoping it's going to get used, you just put on what you need, what the plant needs at the time. Yeah, they call it spoon feeding. Yeah, that's really, really policy. Again, the best fertilizer is the one you have to put on there. And but we can't do that without the ability to manage Mother Nature better with water. So then the question got to, well, how much water do you need? We've always been assuming that we couldn't do it here because if, like Steve said, if we get a big rain, then we can't go and irrigate the next day. So I said, how much water have we got to put on to get a fertigation on? Now they're telling me that less than a quarter of an inch can't even do a fertigation pass. Well, if I get an inch of rain tomorrow and I had to go the next day with a quarter of an inch, that wouldn't be an issue. You know what I mean? Because soil's loosened up, it would take that water. If I had to go with a half an inch or 3/4 of an inch to get the fertigation on, then it would be could be a different story. But it sounds to me like the possibilities are really there, that even with our environment what we build, mostly we only need supplemental irrigation. But we could use irrigation systems to add our fertilizers through the year and do way more efficient use and minimize the impact. To me, it's again a win-win, but it's not something that happens overnight. We're way behind in the research. It's going to take a long time to slowly progress this. This isn't something that happens quickly. So the frustrating thing for me is, I hope I don't have to wait for you to die to get this going. I might be out of business by then.
Just a few quick comments that I had the opportunity to be chair of the nitrate committee, and actually there's research that was carried on for many years. We had, I believe they're called lysimeters. They're all over the fields and things like that. And it's been well documented here on PEI that most of the leaching occurs after the potato crop is lifted. It's in the fall. And to Jason's point, it's because of residual fertilizer. So fertilizer that wasn't used during growing season. And like the last 2 years, we had the greatest probability, or the least probability, greatest probability that we're going to have not enough rain is now in August. And like the last 2 years, we didn't have rain for 4 to 5 weeks. And so we're growing varieties like Russet Burbank, that's a 150 plus day variety in a 135 day or so season. So we're putting in a condensed season. So we need to put on only the right amount so that they'll mature. If we over fertilize, they'll be too revved up. They won't, they won't be physiologically mature in the fall. Yeah. But what happens here, the big unknown is rainfall. So like the last couple of years, we don't have enough rain. We put on just enough. The fertilizer doesn't get taken up by the plant, and there's some left over at the end of the season. With supplemental irrigation, with the right amount of moisture, it can be removed, so there's a little less. There's been studies, part of agriculture, last year, and those studies ongoing this year as well, have shown that it's about, in some cases, a lot more, but I'm going to say around 30% less nitrates under irrigated fish dry land. This is last year's data. Kensington North Watershed Association did some of that work as well, showed the same thing. There's a lot less residual nitrogen under irrigated versus non-irrigated potatoes. So it's actually a solution. And I often think that potatoes, and like most plants, are drinkers, and that's how they get their nutrition, is by getting nutrition out of soil moisture. If there's not enough moisture, they can't take it up, and it's left over at the end of the year. So,
Gary, is this the kind of research that needs to be done before a moratorium is dropped? I mean, if in fact these better things can happen, and Jason's talking about the need that we're kind of far behind, is it do we have to catch up first before we lift the moratorium, or can we do both at the same time?
to me, it would make sense to start looking at the wells that are already in place and to start doing the research on that. Because from what I know, there really hasn't been that kind of in-depth research on that, rather than opening it up to a whole new ballgame. The other thing is we're probably hearing from, you know, one of the better farmers on PEI who sounds like he looks after his land. But, you know, I went just before Arthur when I was listening to the radio, and it said that they were going to get 20 to 25 millimeters per hour for 4 hours on Saturday. I'm driving home and somebody's spraying the fields on Friday afternoon. So what I worry about is that the province has no enforcement people at all. I mean, they have very few people. Whenever I talk to the provincial people about enforcement, they kind of cringe and you see that they don't want to take on extra work. So what happens, you know, I'm not saying that a best farmer is actually going to solve the nitrate stuff, but what happens when we open that up and we get a lot of people without the proper enforcement and monitoring? So I'm much more happy thinking, let's look at what we've got already. We're using them. We can do the research on that. And if it makes sense, then we can grow from there, rather than growing and saying, does this make sense?
And I certainly hear what you're saying, and there are issues of trust here, you know, that if every farmer were as conscientious as Jason, you know, then you could think, well, you know, here's a guy that's going to do the right thing. Now, Fred, you've spent a good part of your life trying to get farmers and the general public and environmentalists and shellfishermen and so on sort of talking to each other and seeing if you could find some common agreement on issues of management and so on. How did you go about that, and does it continue to work, you know, 2 or 3, 4, 5 years after the fact that you made all that effort?
Okay. Yeah, before I go there, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. I'm curious, the nitrate levels in Prince Edward Island are decreasing. Did I hear that? How do we know that?
You can actually go online under the Department of Environment website, and they have the data, and Fang probably can speak to this, but it shows and it's in streams. And actually one of the presenters yesterday, George Summers showed it yesterday, and it monitors a number of sites across PEI, and they've showed that the levels have been dropping for the last 5 years.
There must be people in my streams I don't know about. 27 streams in our management area, and that's a new one.
Is that right? Yeah.
Who's doing it, do you think?
I don't say what collect.
The Department of Environment is monitoring the streams national levels on pretty regular basis. And they have many sites across the island. Okay. And then the data were presented by George in the graph yesterday. And they show that how many streams, a few of them, showing that it's declining, not declining, at least the level of trees in those streams. And the data is.
And that would be all across Prince Edward Island, or specific to some areas, or?
I cannot say that, but I know based on those 7 or 6 sites, it's saying that. You can find the data on the miners' website.
Okay, I'll look at that.
And then check with him, you will agree with that.
Okay. Regarding certain area wildlife's working relationship with agricultural producers in our area, it's fairly strong. It's been fairly good. I think number one reason is we just got some great producers, great farmers that are open-minded, subject to experimentation, things of that nature. So that was good. We also had Surrey Area Wildlife has done a number of watershed plans, community-based, where he's held a lot of public meetings in the different areas across the eastern end of PEI, and the stakeholders got to hear they got to hear the woes of the agricultural producers. The agriculture got to hear the woes of the general stakeholders in terms of where each other was at. Needless to say, some of those meetings had to have a good facilitator to bring things in control. But we had the rules, no finger pointing, and it worked well. I quite honestly think what came out of that was some people respected the elements of what the farmers were looking forward. In the case of a lot of the stakeholders have wrong information to a certain extent. And I think that also the producers got to hear that the general public out there had some deep concerns, especially with nitrates and the health of their water quality. Okay. We, as an organization, we have a good communication package that we work with our people. We put out, depending on funding, 4 to 6 newsletters per year, and if there's anything in there in terms of any agricultural projects or any environmental issues on the area, we write stories on them. So we do both sides of the thing. If there's producers that receive environmental awards, we make sure we do something of that nature. If there's some sort of a project we have working with Agriculture Canada, and people are seeing different things in different farmers' fields, we make sure we write up so people understand what's going on, and they kind of ask you, like, you know, what are you doing out there in that field? You know, that kind of scene. I definitely make a point that, I guess probably helps too, that see it's getting a long series of years here. I guess I'm getting to be a fair bit of an antique, but I do remember watching Toronto Maple Leafs win the last Stanley Cup. It was black and white, and hoping I'll live to see it in color. Okay. Anyway, I think the fact that I've been down there for a number of years, born Eastern end of PEI, taught school there for 31 years, ran a small farm myself, known as a guy that not much bullshit in between, and a fairly good worker. I think I had an element of respect in the community, and so it was easy for me to work along. And now the situation's, I guess, a reflection of my age. Mainly young farmers I taught in school. Okay, so that always helped. The other thing that kind of helped a little bit, my early going through, that we had a program come along, it was called EI, Ecological Goods and Services Project, and it worked up here in Stanley Bridge area too, Trout River up here, and I was coordinator of it, and we got a package from Agriculture Canada where we could pay some dollars basically for farmers to do some best management practices, and of course a lot of the best management practice many of the farmers in our area were already doing. So the situation was financial incentives in there, and the fact that I was able, which eventually that program led into Alice program, that's where it came from, and all the payments and stuff that came from that. So the fact that I was able to sprinkle some money around the community to the farmers didn't hurt me too damn much either, quite honestly. That kind of helped. I think communication's everything, and I think that's the secret. Good communication, good, open, transparent communication, and I honestly believe, quite deep down, that no farmer wants to die and pass on and have an epitaph on the tombstone that I raped the soil for economic benefit or anything of that nature. That's totally false. I believe that basically they'd like to keep on, every farmer would keep on farming as best as they can, environmentally, best way they can, but as long as they're able to keep the doors hanging, their sheds straight and stuff like that, with some kind of an economic return. Okay, I think that's their goal, to make a living and do the best they can. It's like school teachers, everything else is a few rotten apples and bad apple, and probably picks up on that quick.
I think maybe the real elephant in the room here is this issue that had this been cold crop growers or blueberry growers saying, you know, we need a little bit more irrigation, I'm just not sure that there would have been quite the negative response that came out. So I'm wondering is this a sort of condemnation or worry about the cultural practices within potato growing that's really the issue that's being debated, as opposed to strictly irrigation, because we do have a sense that it's a dynamic groundwater system, lots of water there, but there's so much opposition to this going on. Stephen, what do you think?
I think it was between it being a dry year last year with Charlottetown having such water problems, and I think ordinary people that aren't connected, like Greg says, to the land, one thing we're all connected to is the tap pretty well. I think that kind of just enhanced it or made it worse probably, is that when the data sector was wanting to have the moratorium limited, Charlottetown was being told we can't even wash your car or water your lawn. I think it's a good time for the government to be looking at a water policy. The sad part is that they're going to slap something together once again without any science behind it, and just hope they keep buffering themselves and pushing everything down the road. One thing they could have done since the moratorium went on in like 2002 or whatever was, when Gary was asking there, was just start doing more intensive studies on what we already have. And we would have 10 years of research behind us, and we're 10 years behind just because of that. I'm thinking because we've seen so much either forest fires or floods throughout Canada too. It just seems the environment is taking a hit, and I think it just being more of people's conscious awareness, anything like that, and it's come up there.
Ray, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I agree. I think Charlottetown's a big issue, and I was glad you brought that up earlier, Stephen, because the wells in Charlottetown run 24 hours a day, every day of the year. So there's quite a contrast between and the pressures that puts on the aquifer versus supplemental irrigation. And I don't think that's something that's gotten out there really clear. Is that there'll be years when they will, Jason won't use his high capacity well at all, and there'll be other years he might only use a couple times, and then probably at max, maybe 5 inches would be applied via that. So it's only a certain time of year. But I think I do understand the public reaction though, and it's like I said, I think we've had issues in the past, and I think we're still being with fish kills, and I keep bringing that up, the fish kills and nitrates. And there's been so many things that have been done. I know Steve talked yesterday about the 4R initiative and on the nutrient management side and the Barclay. I was up there yesterday and spent some time with John Purdy in the project at CropLight. I said I'd love to hop in a plane and fly over that area. The work that's been done there has been tremendous. So there are some sensitive areas, but they're being addressed, and there's been continuous improvement. And I don't think the public are still, it's because of the mistakes we've made over the years or in the past. And when acreage peaked in '99, it was 113,000 acres, and it was beyond, I believe, the capacity for this island. So we're at a more manageable number of acres. Things like irrigation will actually mean, or if it means, or can mean, more marketable yield per acre, it can mean less acres. I think I'm not surprised, and again, looking forward, it's the challenges for like organizations like the Potato Board and the Federation of Agriculture, the Farmers Union, and others. Is how do we communicate better? And the watershed groups are a great way, but how do we? George Webster said not too long ago, we're farming in a subdivision, and I'd add to that, and we don't know our neighbors very well. So.
Gary, what would have to happen for you to gain a little bit more confidence, I guess, in going ahead that the right things would happen?
I think what's happened is people have lost patience. Because again, when I sat on the round table, that was a while ago. And we thought, we had a lot of potato farmers on the round table, great bunch. I think everybody went in there with a lot of trepidation and suspicion and came out as a pretty cohesive group that actually liked each other. And we thought we had solved some of the problems, and in a lot of cases we were promised that we had solved some of the problems. And, we can say that we're looking backward all the time, but the fish kills keep happening. We had 26 areas of rivers on PEI that had anoxic conditions last year. We've had homeowners who have their high levels of nitrates in their well from nothing that they've done. They haven't done anything wrong. And if they want to fix something, they have to pay for it. So there's been a lot of stuff that we keep thinking, okay, we've gotten there, but as soon as we get that bad rainfall again, and we know it's going to come, if it comes at the right time, we get dead fish. So it's hard for people to say, okay, all of a sudden I trust you. What I would like to see first, if people actually said, yes, as the Federation of Agriculture, the Potato Marketing Board, or Cavendish Farms said, we're going to institute good crop rotations. So none of this, we can fudge the 3-year crop rotation. We'll say, let's have a good crop rotation that makes sure we don't have sediment going into our water. let's look at, a whole bunch of conditions that we can do first. Let's look at minimum levels of organic matter in our soils. I think those kinds of things would, for the public, they would say, Jesus, they are taking those steps. I think that's a great thing. And it's interesting, it's not that people wouldn't say the same thing about blueberry growers. If blueberry growers had been responsible for dead fish in the water, people would be banging their signpost the same thing. So I don't think it's just against potatoes for no reason. I think in some cases, well, in a lot of cases, potato growers have been responsible for a lot of the environmental problems on PEI. And again, it doesn't mean that people aren't trying to change and do better, but until we stop seeing those rivers run red, until we stop seeing dead fish in those streams, I think there's going to be mistrust there. And I think in a lot of cases, it's deserved.
Jason, a tough moment to be a potato farmer?
Yeah, I sit here and listen, and I understand where you're coming from. The frustrating part for a lot of us is a lot of our meetings, we obviously have the discussion about the bell curve. We're very familiar with this. Scott Howe used to hear this all the time. Somebody drilled it in him one time. And there's always a professor, I guess. You always have the bell curve of population. Where you get 70% in the middle, 15% on either end. And we can't, as a group of growers and PEI of 250, I don't know what to do about the 15% on the other end. You know what I mean? We're all trying hard to make a difference. Can I guarantee you there's never going to be silt in the rivers? Absolutely not. But we are working on different tillage equipment. I think it was George's, no, it was Yufang's presentation yesterday. He's been doing the testing on plowing in the fall versus spring. And I wanted to have a chance to talk to him because one of the things a bunch of growers are using now is called it's a brand name, but it's a synchro plow. There's another brand called Lemkin make the same kind of plow, and it's a new tillage device out for the last bunch of years. And people are using it instead of a mower plow and doing it in the fall after a roundup application. And it's holding a lot of trash. We call it not trash, but the hay material and stuff in the top part of the soil. So we did this year. We rented one or borrowed one last year before when we were doing it. We still do mostly board plow. So we rented one. We did half of 3 different fields, and then we went out and bought sensors. And we've got water sensors, moisture sensors in all of those fields in both sides. Checking. We've also got temperature sensors in there. And we got one that can do some other stuff, and we're working on trying to tell that too from a nutrient point of view, or from some salinity point of view. And what's in our early testing so far, what we're seeing at least, is the moisture level is certainly a lot higher, and the trash level, or the organic matter level, kind of in the top layer of the soil that's still there, is why, because it's holding the moisture in. So that should help the crops. But the other thing that we've seen, even in the spring, was there was less erosion. You know what I mean? Compared to the mower plow, it just stayed put. And when you could walk down the mower plow part, and then when you walked off it into where the synchro was, you moved your rubber boots. So the water was being held there and it wasn't moving, and the water bottles were going over the top of the other. So like there's a lot of work like that being done. People are getting to that level. We're actually pricing one of those machines up in our operation now, as we speak. We plan to buy one and do as much of our ground as possible. Can it be done on all of it? No. There'd be wet ground that we couldn't do it on because it might hold too much and then spoil the crop. You know what I mean? It can hold too much moisture. Can it be done on 70 to 80% of it? Most likely. There's growers now are doing it 100% in the last 2 years. I know a grower particularly that's doing 100% of his acres with that. He's on the higher ground and he's getting along with it. That's just one example. On our operation last year, we had 4 projects with the Department of Agriculture in the MWM family of farms where we were doing farmable berms, grass waterways, and stuff like that. This year we've done 2 that I know of, and I've got 2 on the back burner right now. The plans are drawn up, but just after 2 tough years of hard drought, kind of wait until we get a little bit more money ahead and then move on to the next ones. But we've been at this now for 30 years, so it's frustrating as a producer, and I know a lot of my friends are the same way.